Hi there. So today, Whitmer on the edge of defeat in Michigan, according to the latest poll and projection. Now, this was a story that I saw this morning, and I thought to myself, what's wrong with this? Something doesn't feel exactly right. On the edge of defeat. And I didn't know what I was missing. So I did the responsible thing. I looked it up because I want to emphasize this. Never be afraid of looking something up. If you don't understand it, that's how you learn. I only learned about Japanese when I started looking up things in Japanese for Japanese people. That's how I really started learning. Now, whether you're doing that or not, never be afraid of looking something up because there's always something more to learn. So, but when we're on the edge of something, we're very close to that thing. For example, a species on the edge of extinction. The company was teetering on the edge of disaster or bankruptcy. He was on the edge of saying something when the phone rang. How about a different one? On the verge, close to doing or experiencing something, or at the point when something is about to happen. Example, I was on the verge of accusing my roommate of stealing my money from the jar in the kitchen when I remembered I'd used it to pay the pizza delivery man. My mom was on the verge of crying when my dad forgot her birthday. Tensions continued to rise between the rebels and the government until they were on the verge of war. So you see, when we go back to the start, Whitmer on the edge of defeat in Michigan, according to the latest poll and projection. That sounds like something that she's going to experience. It's not inevitable. It's not for certain. I was trying to say for sure, and then I was trying to say for certain at the same time. This is a common thing. So for certain, it's not. It's not. She could win. Whitmer could win. She is the incumbent Democratic Party governor of Michigan, a major U.S. state. I'd say it comes after, let's say, New York, California, Texas, Florida, and I'd say Michigan is number five, just in terms of overall economic importance, population strength, all sorts of things like that. Chicago is a very major city in the United States, and it has been since the beginning of the United States. It's been very important economically. So for an incumbent to lose in a state like that where everybody knows who she is, it's a big deal. So if there are problems for her popularity, they are deeply ingrained by now. But anyway, the point is, from the English side, being on the edge of defeat sounds like something that's going to happen to you. It sounds like something that you should be on the verge of. But I figured it was no good to actually just do this and then end there. So we're going to do something a little bit different. So I find it a lot easier, instead of telling people what not to do, I want to show them positive examples. And I think that this is a good policy for tutoring or anything else in life. Show people what to do, not just tell them what not to do. Works with little kids too. So I'm going to read off a bunch of these sentences. He stood on the edge of the cliff. Good example. He glimpsed something on the edge of his vision. That's the edge of your vision here. He fell, striking his head on the edge of the table. Well, that's nasty. The girl poised the glass on the edge of the table. That's dangerous. If it's on the edge of the table, it could fall off. She had a house on the edge of the town. Well, better than being on the edge of a cliff. That's dangerous too. Some hurricane comes, you can lose that house. The standard of living today is on the edge of subsistence. But subsistence is still a thing. It's a state, but it's still a thing. The town is perched on the edge of a steep, precipitous cliff. The company is on the edge of collapse. You see how those two are related, how they sound related? They feel related. New housing developments mushroomed on the edge of town. Town is a thing. She perched uncomfortably on the edge of the table. Okay. Their economy is on the edge of collapse. Again, collapse is a thing, but that's the economy, it's not a person. He hovered on the edge of consciousness. Consciousness is considered a thing here, so you can be on the edge of it. She was perched on the edge of the sofa. Well, sofa is a lot more comfortable than a table. Billy sat on the edge of the bed. Again, better than a table. She sat demurely on the edge of her chair. Well, okay. His voice teetered on the edge of hysteria. Hysteria. That's an interesting one because there's an old prejudice that you only use hysteria with women or girls. And it's not true at all, but people found it that, well, if you're using hysteria for a man, then it's supposed to be humiliating. Well, that's not because of the word, it's because of what it represents. But, you're supposed, there's an expectation that a properly civilized member of society should be under control, under your own control. But it doesn't always work out that way. You know, tragedy strikes, people break down in tears. Great if you don't. If you do, I don't care. I don't mind. It's natural. It's understandable. The they live right on the edge of town. Like this one. He sat nervously on the edge of his chair. Well, that's like earlier. The company is tottering on the edge of bankruptcy, which is a thing. He is teetering on the edge of catastrophe, another thing. She sat on the edge of her mother's bed. Again, beds. She parked herself on the edge of the bed. You park cars, but you can park yourself. It is valid language. It's just that often people will use it for cars anyway. She found herself on the edge of an abyss. Okay, I think we get the idea. So how about on the verge here? Example sentences. I stopped as I was doing these, so I'll find one I didn't do. I was on the verge of calling my ex-boyfriend, but luckily my roommate grabbed my phone. Okay, so that's a relapse. The boyfriend addiction. We were on the verge of purchasing plane tickets for a holiday when my husband was laid off from his job. Well, that's really bad. I think my sister is on the verge of a nervous breakdown, so I'm relieved she's agreed to see my psychiatrist tomorrow. After waiting in line for 30 minutes, we were on the verge of riding the roller coaster when a thunderstorm started and they closed the ride for the day. Well, that's just tragic. So, those are examples of on the verge. And before that, on the edge. Now, as a bonus, I want to cover on the verge and on the brink, because do they mean the same thing? For the most part, yes, but again, there are subtle differences in how they're actually used. So, as I'm recording this, we're unofficially at the end of the Liz Truss period in the United Kingdom. And another person by the name of Sunak is about to be appointed as Prime Minister. So he is on the verge of being appointed Prime Minister by King Charles III. It's going to happen. The king just needs to get in the proper location to actually do the deed. So it's been decided by the party that this man will become the next prime minister because he'll lead the party with a large majority in parliament. So it will happen. It is inevitable. Could we say he's on the brink of being declared prime minister? Not really, because on the brink makes it sound like it's going to be a disaster. Well, it's not a disaster for him, at least not yet. Is it a disaster for the country? Well, we don't know that for sure. It's not set in stone. But if we said England is on the brink of having its third prime minister in 3 months, that would be true. It is on the brink of that, and it is a very questionable future, and it is more importantly, it's at a critical juncture, a critical point. The verge would be you're right up to here. The brink would be you're right up to here and you're about to go over. So that's like the brink. A precipice would be similar. A cliff could be similar, but precipice is a fancy word for cliff. So, yeah. So these are similar things, but the nuances are a little bit different. So, as I said, for the incoming prime minister, he really wants the job. So it's not a bad thing for him. Not yet. We'll see. But it's on the verge of his appointment. Because verge is a more neutral statement, but it does have immediacy. It is something that matters for being close to something important, being near the border of it. And that's why, if we go back to Whitmer, Governor Whitmer of Michigan, she could be on the verge of defeat, but if we were saying that she's on the brink of defeat, that's more what you'd say if it was election night, 66% of the votes had been already counted, and she was facing a deficit of, say, 3% of the vote. It would be very difficult for her to overcome that. So it would be on the brink of defeat because she would be very, 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 very close to being defeated. On the verge is you're close, but it's not completely inevitable. So these are subtle differences in how we use these words. But the important thing is to get a feel for how they're used, which is why I said when I first saw on the edge of defeat, I was like, that feels wrong, but why? Because I would default to Verge. And it's all right to use something that's different if that's exactly why you're using it, because it's different. Because variety is the spice of life. You want to be interesting as a writer. But that's why it seemed somewhat unusual to me. And I didn't want to mistake it just for something that was, American versus Canadian or British English or something like that. No, it's because Americans usually would use Verge in an educated context also, but it's okay to be different. It's just that when you're learning the language, you need to understand how people usually use something, and then you deviate from it if you have a good reason. And also to have alternatives like brink, precipice, cliff. So, I hope that you are on the verge of learning something interesting and that you actually get over that cliff. But that's a good thing. Take care, have fun, enjoy the language because that's important too.